everyone, what's going on? Welcome back to episode 153. Well, I guess not welcome back. This is the first time you're hearing episode 153 of the Retro Gamers podcast. Larry here, and I'm joined by a different Anthony. Anthony Rippo. Normally, the other half of the Retro Gamers podcast is actually out of commission for a moment. So definitely we wish speedy recovery for Anthony. Everything's okay. Everything was planned. Don't worry. But we do wish him speedy recovery. But in the meantime, I have another Anthony I've known just as long as the first Anthony. And welcome back to the Retro Gamers. Yes, it is the host of the Yin and The Yang podcast, Anthony Chu. Anthony, welcome.
Hey, thank you so much for having me here. And first and foremost, before we begin today, as just to go by what you just said just now, we do wish Anthony a huge hello, speedy recovery. Hope you're doing well, buddy. And we want you back here soon.
Yes, absolutely. And in the meantime, though, Ant, what's going on with yourself? Tell the world who you are, what you're all about, and where they can find your show.
So basically, the Yin and The Yang podcast is about martial arts, health, fitness, motivation, and pretty much we drop every Friday. We are considering moving into a different time slot, but right now, Friday it is. And you can catch us on Facebook with just type in Yin and Yang podcast on the search. And, you enter our world where we serve up a pretty good show, pretty good plethora of everything that is contact sports, martial arts related, and things like that. So at this present moment, I'm just doing really well. I just went to the doctors, got my typical. I do 2 physicals a year, so came back with a clean bill of health, actually, and I'm feeling great, man.
All right, excellent. That is what we ask for. That you're doing good, you're doing 100%, and
appreciate it.
Sounds good here. All right, yeah, definitely check out the Yin and The Yang podcast wherever you listen to podcasts, and make sure you give them, give us. I'm on the show too. I don't know why I'm talking like, it's part of the More family of podcasts. So, yeah, definitely check them out. Give them a 5-star, a thumbs up, a like, whatever you listen to. But today's a big one. And today we have a big milestone as we're going to be celebrating the 130th. That is correct, folks. 130th anniversary of Nintendo.
Okay, so for someone who is a gamer, such as myself, but for a lot of people who are not diehard gamers, I'm sure a lot of you right now that are listening are probably getting out your calculators or your math books or whatever you're doing, and what you're trying to figure out is if Nintendo is 130 years old, or the 130th anniversary, if you go by an anniversary as each year, that means that Nintendo goes back to the 1890s? Or how does that calculate? Because
September 23rd, 1889. Is
really?
When it started.
How?
Yep, absolutely. It started as a playing card company in 1889, based out of Kyoto, Japan. They marketed what was called Hanafuda cards, Japanese cards. I think they were used for a multitude of different types of card games. And then it basically merged with their, I guess you can call Nintendo, like, kind of became itself in 1933. In 1951, it changed its name to Nintendo Playing Card Company Limited, and actually continues to they actually, interesting enough, continue to make playing cards in Japan. They have their own tournament. It's a game called Contract Bridge Tournament. It's called the Nintendo Cup. And here's a fun fact. And do you know what Nintendo actually the word Nintendo translates into?
No, not at all.
Leave luck to heaven.
Wow.
Or also the Temple of Free Hanafuda.
Well, I mean, considering, and it makes sense because considering the fact that the country is a very, very spiritual, very spiritual country, from what I've gathered, and when the one time that I've been there, and Japanese people take that very seriously and with pride. So, it's anything that connects you to heaven is actually considered to be or connects you to the gods or something like that, it's considered a very, very powerful piece. So it's really interesting in how, that really makes a lot of sense. Like, I'm really, really learning about the history because, to most viewers, I mean, when you conceptually think about it, most viewers really think of Nintendo as just this one, and I'm talking about outside the United States. Mm-hmm. Most people look upon Nintendo as, something that just came about in the 80s, and a lot of people who are not from that country of Japan will think that it's from the 80s and that's when it started. But holy smokes, man, it started in the late 20th century.
1889.
No, I'm sorry, the late 19th century. I'm sorry about that.
Talk a little bit more about the history. 1956, the grandson of the founder of the Nintendo playing card company, Hiroshi Yamauchi, came to the U.S. to talk with, at the time, the most dominant playing card manufacturer here in the U.S., United States Playing Card Company, to try and, I guess, merge to get them all together. They actually acquired the license to use Disney characters on playing cards at that point.
Wow.
In 1963, the company was renamed from the Nintendo Playing Card Company Limited to Nintendo Corporation Limited. Here are some other interesting quick facts about. Now, we all know Nintendo with their home consoles have definitely experimented. Virtual Boy, the Wii, the Switch now. These are basically almost like experiments. But Ant, listen to some of these ventures that Nintendo actually dipped their toe into for a little while.
Okay.
They ran a taxi company for a short time.
Oh, wow. That's insane.
Called Daya. It was actually successful at first, but then the old labor union kicked in and kind of ran them out of business.
Oh, jeez. Well, that ends things.
They started a TV network. Nintendo started a food company selling instant rice. And
what?
And of course, one of the most famous ones, they had a love hotel chain.
That does not surprise me in the slightest.
I mean, we're talking like hourly. So.
Wow.
Yeah, and then 1960.
That is just unbelievable.
It's crazy how much Nintendo has dipped in, and this is even before getting to the electronics and everything like that. In 1966, Nintendo moved into the toy industry with the Ultra Hand, which was like kind of like one of those. I remember, like in Who Framed Roger Rabbit, the glove, the Extendo glove.
Yes, I remember that.
Something like that. It was called the Ultra Hand. They also made like love testers, like you see in a bar or something like that, and some interesting light gun games. So in the 60s, the late 60s, they started experimenting and started getting into gaming, video game, basically. They really produced a lot of light gun games, which is interesting because when you look at the original NES and the Zapper games on NES, because Nintendo had made actual laser clay shooting systems, a light gun game, such as kind of like along the lines of Wild Gunman. And then these were translated into games on the Nintendo.
Well, you got to give them credit for really innovating a lot. I mean, no other company has really tried to even outdo them or to try to even compete with them on a level of creating, let's say, a glove, creating, let's say, like a pad that you could literally step on and do track and field on, or, a lot of these things that are like motion simulated, joysticks and things like that. I mean, no other, at least to my knowledge, no other company has really even tried to either compete with that or outdo it, but they will see what Nintendo can do. Nintendo, in some senses, to me, is kind of like a lab rat, right, for video games. Because if you look at it this way, they put themselves out there like they're the testing dummies, or they're the the lab rats. And then when people see what they can do, all of a sudden now you have imitators. You have things that will come close to it and all that. So, I mean, but still, it just whomever is part of that creative team or division, holy smokes, like you got to really give them a lot of credit.
Yeah, no, Nintendo wasn't scared to step into the field, especially a little bit of the unknown, because in 1977, June 1st of 1977, Nintendo released its first home console, the Color TV Game 6.
When is this again?
This was June 1 of 77.
Wow.
So the Color TV Game 6, which was followed by the Color TV Game 15, followed by the Color TV Game Racing 112, the Color TV Game Blockbreaker, and finally the Computer TV Game. So 77 is when Nintendo officially started that, almost like that first generation console, if you will. And like a lot of consoles back in the late 70s, like the console itself was a dedicated system for games. The Color TV Game 6 had light tennis, which was basically Pong, hockey and volleyball. And each one could be played either a singles or a two-player game.
Okay.
TV Game 15 kind of branched out a little bit. Hockey. What other games did they have on there? Like in a few versions of like ping pong and stuff like that. Tennis penalty shootout was the hockey. So a racing game. So this Color TV game, and I've seen them every now and again. The Color TV game, this is what Nintendo got into the system. And just to show, the Color TV game series has the highest sales figures of all the first generation video game consoles. So Nintendo right off the bat knew what they were doing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's crazy how if you look at, and you could put Nintendo up right with a lot of innovative products that start off virtually as something they're not known for today. And they're looked upon back in the day as, I mean, they start off as playing cards. You know, who would have ever thought in this world, you know, that they would become like possibly the number one video game producing company in the world for households. And yet, I mean, you have like a lot of companies out there that don't even start off with what they originally intended to be. You know, and you could definitely put Nintendo there. By the way, for all of you sports fans out there, is it true? Now, I don't know how true this is, okay, because I don't follow baseball. But is it true that the Nintendo company actually owns or was a majority owner of the Seattle Mariners baseball team?
Yeah, I believe in 2016 they sold off majority of their shares, but they did. They had, I think, a 55% ownership in the Mariners.
Oh, get out of here.
So they did,
really?
Yeah. They were, yep. Which is probably why it made it easy for them to get like one of the greatest baseball games, in my opinion, of all time on the Super Nintendo. Ken Griffey Jr. presents Major League Baseball.
Ah, that makes sense. I was going to say, why Ken Griffey of all people? You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, Griffey is an amazing player.
Oh, he's outstanding, legendary player. But then at the same time, I did not realize that they owned or the majority owner of the Seattle Mariners baseball team. And I can also, in the opposite end of the spectrum, understand why they dropped their shares, because the Seattle Mariners, from what I understand, are one of the very few baseball teams who have never seen a World Series before.
I don't think so. I'm not 100% sure on that.
I don't think they've ever been, and they've never won either.
Yeah, that possible. But I do know that they sold it, and maybe in a reason why they did this, Nintendo sold their stock to, I don't have the gentleman's name, but they sold their stock to a leading, like mobile, I think a mobile gaming company or something like that. And 2016 was also the first time we saw a Nintendo produce a game for the mobile phone, Super Mario Run.
Okay.
So that may have something to do with it, hand in hand. So with the Color TV game, Nintendo's already now in the households, getting into the households, and around this time, the late 70s, a student of product development, who was tasked to create the casings for some of the Color TV game consoles. This gentleman is now synonymous with Nintendo, because I'm talking about Shigeru Miyamoto. Was hired by Nintendo in the late 70s, and the man created the most iconic games ever, Super Mario Brothers, Legend of Zelda, and he was hired to create casings for the video game consoles.
Wow. That's wild, man. You know what? I think that one of the formulas that makes Nintendo so good is that you actually have people who are very passionate about the product, who are
absolutely.
probably video gamers themselves. I mean, I think that once, it's just like kind of like in a lot of businesses that fail, what's the secret ingredient to a failing, business venture? Add suits. I mean, in a sense that like when you have people who don't understand the operation, who don't understand the product, and who don't understand exactly what, they don't have passion for it or what's being marketed, it's a recipe for disaster. And yet in reality, when you look at, people who work for Nintendo or created for them are definitely passionate gamers. You could tell almost right away. Now, how they got their ideas is unreal to me. Absolutely unreal to me.
It takes some smart people to come up with some of this stuff.
I mean, just to come up with something as simple as it appears today, like Super Mario Brothers. How do you come up with something like that,
Well, that's what Miyamoto was fantastic about, just his imagination. Zelda, he created Zelda for his love of just running around in the fields of wherever he grew up in Japan. Discovery, and that's what kind of sparked his interest, and that's what led us to The Legend of Zelda, which even to today, in 2019, everyone I know with a Switch is all about The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening right now. Even I myself played it for about an hour before we started recording.
Well, there you go. I mean, you have people cosplaying Zelda. You have people, who are still, there are fan pages dedicated to it. There's cult followings. I think that I have a friend of mine who goes to San Diego Comic-Con every year, and you'll see tons of people dress up as Zelda. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah. Well, I'll be reporting from New York Comic-Con, and we'll see what kind of cosplayers.
Oh, I'm sure there will definitely be.
Now, in Nintendo's history, so from 1889 to the late 70s, we'll even go up to 1981. Okay. A lot happened. Playing cards, and then actually a lot for a long time playing cards. They tried to hand some other ventures in the 60s, and then it was the late 70s. So almost, 90 years at this point almost. It took them to finally get to what's making their bread and butter to this day. And then, it goes to show just what technology does, where you have all this history, but it's not really until the last almost 40 years is when all of a sudden the technology blows up, because Nintendo kicks it into high gear and they start spitting out some of the best home consoles, and one or two not so good, and maybe one dud. But, Nintendo, they go full force at this point, starting in 81 with, they get into the arcade industry in the mid to late 70s. But their real first hit as far as an arcade, and at least here in the U.S., was 1981, and the name of the game was Donkey Kong.
Absolute instant classic when you look at Donkey Kong.
Created by Miyamoto.
Right. Well, that another fantastic creation. And I think that the reason why Nintendo was such a hit in the United States is because you have to understand that the way life was at that point was that, in the video gaming world I'm talking about with life, is that it's so simple. It's so basic. There isn't, there's no 8-bit graphics or anything like that. You're playing Atari, so you have something like Pole Position, you have, a great game, but you also have very simple things like Pong, Pac-Man, and then all of a sudden, you have this massive burst of something that people have never seen before. And it goes to an old saying, which is, if you want the world to take notice, you got to do something that people have never seen before or heard of before. And also, I'm a 76 baby. Okay. So, in 1981, I was only 5 years old at most, but around the early to mid 80s, I remember I went with my cousins to the arcade and my parents to the arcade, and you really had to go out of your house into a pizza place, into a deli, what we now know as a deli, or they used to have these stores called Optimo or Tiamo, where it's just a general store from the neighborhood, and they were the only ones who had video games. and you had to put quarters upon quarters on the screen to say how many games you can play, and you had to wait your turn. So there were people who were waiting forever. And then all of a sudden, Nintendo just burst. Literally, they didn't even knock on the door in America. They kicked the door down.
You know, Donkey Kong was a huge hit. Fun fact, Ant, do you know what licensed character was originally supposed to be Donkey Kong?
King Kong?
Popeye.
Popeye? Really?
Donkey Kong was supposed to be a Popeye game.
No way,
Yeah.
really?
And they just somehow lost the rights somewhere.
You know, I can kind of see that.
Yep.
I can really a strong man, right? Or a strong beast, you know, who's doing what he's doing, throwing barrels down.
Versus Popeye, trying to save olive oil. But think about this. Just think about the impact. And look, I love Popeye. Popeye is my first word. But
okay,
if Donkey Kong was Popeye, then would we have ever gotten Mario? Because Mario basically debuted in Donkey Kong.
It all connects, doesn't it? Because now you have one after the other. Wow.
Sounds interesting.
Wow.
Also, what's interesting as well is this was, again, in the late 70s, early 80s. So Nintendo really hasn't... They did the TV, the color TV games, but we haven't gotten to the Famicom yet because that predates the NES. But now we're seeing a lot of licensing. For those of you who may always wonder, there are Mario Brothers games, Donkey Kong, on other consoles like the Atari, the Intellivision, ColecoVision. So it was a licensing thing for a little while. Like when I remember, like I knew if Donkey Kong was on everything, but I didn't realize Mario, the original Mario Brothers arcade, I hate that game, but the original Mario Brothers arcade is available on, actually I have it on, I think on 2600.
That does not, I have no doubt about that.
It's weird. It's weird to see that.
Okay.
And then Nintendo goes, you know what? Let's try our hands now back into the gaming console itself. And how much do you remember the Game & Watches?
Oh, man. I remember some of it. I don't remember a whole hell of a lot about it. I mean, it was awesome, though. When it first came out, I remember everybody wanted a piece of that. Game & Watch was very simple. In fact, the games are available on the Game Boy Advance, the DS. You can download them as well, I believe, on the Virtual Console. Oh, can you really?
On the Wii U. Yep. The Game & Watch was basically just one screen, LCD. The name tells you. It's like going into the movies, getting ready to watch Snakes on a Plane. What is this movie about? Snakes on a plane. So Game & Watch is exactly what it is. It was a game, and when you weren't playing it, it was your watch. Well, I mean, some you were able to wear on your wrist, but otherwise it was just your clock, and you could set an alarm and everything on it. And the Game & Watch is responsible because Nintendo created and designed our modern day cross pad, our directional pad that we know and love today.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, do you recall the prices of it?
Ooh, price-wise, I don't remember. I mean, I was born in 1980, so all this stuff my parents were getting. So I couldn't tell you what the market value at the time was. I only had like one or two Game & Watches.
Did you ever keep it?
No. Please, my mother, and I know she's listening, but my mother has made me get rid of a lot of stuff when I was young. Moving on to the Super Nintendo, I remember she was like, and God bless her, she meant well. She was like, well, you don't need your Nintendo anymore. You have a Super Nintendo. So guess who sold off most of his NES games?
Oh, geez.
And don't even get me started on the old 6-inch WWE figures. Those old plastic ones?
I remember those. I had like every one of them except for Ricky Steamboat. So
yeah,
and then now by the looks of your studio, you look like you got all your games back.
Most of them. I mean, that was basically the case. I have to do something.
Very nice.
So the Game & Watch comes into play. Great portable gaming, and then Nintendo goes, "Let's do it." You know, now first of all, before that, let's think about the world right now as far as the gaming in the early 80s. You know, we're going through the video game crash at this time, which Atari caused and ET caused with this oversaturation. You know, the infamous ET video game that was made in 5 months, and most of them were buried in a desert out in New Mexico.
Wow.
And the whole industry, the whole gaming industry just collapsed. And, you know, for a while, there really wasn't anything going on. And like a phoenix rising out of the ashes, Nintendo's like, F you, Atari. You know, this guy goes off and creates Chuck E. Cheese. We're going to go and we're going to create, you know, the one of the biggest, most influential video game systems of all time. And we're going to start over in Japan with the family computer, which we all know as the Famicom.
So, I mean, but let me ask you this, though. I'm sure that in Japan, before the Famicom came along, I am guessing for sure that...
well, the crash was more here.
Right. But what I'm saying is that I'm sure that... was the video gaming market still powerful in Japan as it is?
Japan, it pretty much always has. As far as I know, I never heard... and Anthony's read more into this... but as far as I know, they never really lost their luster of gaming. In fact, we talked years ago. I don't even know if the episode's still available at this point, but, you know, we talked about how, Japan really does hold on to their system. The Famicom ran from like 83 to the early 2000s.
Oh, wow.
And we're talking, again, the Famicom, the 8-bit original system.
That's a long time.
They were putting out games when the GameCube was out over here. So
wow.
But the Famicom makes its way into the homes in 1983 in Japan. In 1985, we get a much forward gray and black box, which we know as the Nintendo Entertainment System, the NES. If you call it NES, I'm gonna have to hurt you.
Do you feel that? Okay. Do you feel that the original NES? Do you feel that it was a watered down version sent to America, or do you think that, in your humble opinion, they should have just sent a Famicom?
Well, to be honest with you, even looking back on it, and you know, look, hindsight's 2020.
And this is for the listeners who don't know much about the Famicom.
Yeah, you know,
what I'm saying.
The Famicom, admittedly, did have a better sound system, had a better sound chip, slightly
really?
better graphics. Yep, slightly better graphics. Case in point, Contra. My favorite game on the NES. We got a great Contra, fantastic game here in the US, but in Japan there's cutscenes, there's an animated title screen for Contra. So there was definitely more put into these Japanese games. Now at the time, I didn't even know a Famicom existed. You know, I had no idea of this.
Neither did I.
Yeah,
I mean, you know, because there's no publicity, there's no promotion or advertising in the United States.
Yeah.
Right?
So, I mean, when you look back on it, all right, fine. The Famicom had a few more bells and whistles, but overall, it's about the gameplay. And let's face facts, there are gems on the NES.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, did you have an NES, like an actual NES?
So the thing is, I had to study really hard to get that. And my father, I mean, at that time, you know, $100. Was it $100, $150 or something like that?
A little more than that, yeah.
Was considered a lot of money at that time. Maybe it was like $100, $200 for a gaming system was considered a lot. And my father, you know, we were doing better in the house, but I mean, still.
It was $180. The deluxe set.
$180. Okay, so that's a lot of money, right? And then my father bought the most basic set that we had to build upon that. So I saved up allowance money. My poor brother, I still owe him $20 to this day because we wanted to get the gun control.
Oh, yes, the zapper.
Right, the gun concept of the zapper, yep. I mean, so a lot of that, I mean, to be very honest with you, you know, it's the gems on NES was unreal. Just absolutely unreal. You can literally go, and I'll tell you one thing, okay? My nephew is 20 years old. He can play the daylights out of the most complex games that you see today. Call of Duty, Halo, anything that's out that's popular, he can beat those games in probably a few days within a week, right? Yet I had him play something like Tecmo World Wrestling, or I had him play something like Double Dribble, or I had him play something like Mike Tyson's Punch Out. He couldn't do it. He could not do it. He couldn't get past the second level.
There is a video online of like young kids trying to play like a Game Boy or something like that.
Yeah.
And they're completely confused.
Yeah, exactly. And they have no idea what to do. They have no, I mean, we lived through an amazing time, with NES games. And I mean, oh man. Okay, well, let me ask you this. On that note, do you have a top 5 you can think of the 5 best games that the NES has come out with? Like
personally, or all right. I mean, personally,
like I'll give you the most normal scenario. You're stranded in a desert island. You have an NES. You have a TV.
You have a zapper to my head.
Only 5 games. With whatever accessories you want. 5 games you could play for the rest of the time that you're stranded on this island for an indefinite amount of time. What would you choose?
I mean, I'm going to go Super Mario Brothers 3.
Okay.
I'll go OG Super Mario Brothers.
Yep.
2 games that I know a lot of people, some people can be like, huh? City Connection.
Okay.
Love that game. Solomon's Key.
Wow.
Yes. I mean,
is one underrated secret.
An absolute lost treasure. And pro wrestling.
Really?
Because to this day, pro wrestling is the only wrestling game I know with a cameraman.
That is true. Good point.
So, some quick stats here on the NES. Well, first of all, you were talking about how if we got a watered-down version of the Famicom, here's the lifespan. The Famicom ran from 83 to 2003. The NES ran from 85 to 95. So the Famicom almost doubled up the NES. Excuse me. So units sold, 34 million units were sold in the U.S., 19.35 million units sold in Japan. The top 3 best-selling games for the NES, goes without saying, but not in order, are the 3 original Super Mario Brothers. The original Super Mario Brothers, 40.24 million. Super Mario Brothers 3 sold 18 million as of July 27th of 2008. And Super Mario Brothers 2 comes in at 10 million. And here's an interesting fact, Ant. This is weird. So, okay, Famicom comes out July of 83 in Japan. North America we get the NES October of 85. Europe gets it. Europe and I'm guessing that's Australia. Europe and Australia get it in 86, 87.
Right.
Brazil gets the NES in 93.
Oh my God. 2 years before the ending of it?
That's weird.
Wow. Good grief.
And of course, on our end here, we didn't have too many add-ons with the NES. We had the Zapper, like you mentioned, which was awesome. You basically go up right to the screen. And you just zap away. Really, really cheap.
Yeah. Hey, Zach, of course you do.
But, we have 4-player adapters and stuff. But the Famicom, this is where I'm a little jealous of the Famicom. The Famicom gets the disc system, which was, here, I'm going to show it. I know everyone else at home has seen something like this, but I have one disc system game. Anthony actually has the disc system and games. Some NES games came on floppies, these rigid floppies. This is a copy of Super Mario Brothers. This is not a copy of Super Mario Brothers 2. What is this? Oh,
it's something.
Is that Super Mario Brothers 2? I think this is pro wrestling. Wait a minute. I'm going to speak to Ant about this. I think I got a wrong
Somebody
game.
sell you a bill of goods?
I don't know. I got to talk to Anthony. Metroid came on it. Castlevania came on these carts. You were able to save, which was something new back then. So they got that. They got online. The Famicom went online. People bet on horse races online on the Famicom.
Jeez.
And that was considered the 3rd iteration of the system. Of course, before we move forward, I want to mention one of what I always thought was a fun story. Universal City Studios versus Nintendo in a court of law over trademark infringement of Donkey Kong, where Donkey Kong may have been a little bit too close to King Kong.
No kidding.
Meanwhile, Universal was in a battle with RKO General, who owned the rights to King Kong. So I don't know what Universal was doing.
So who won? What's
Nintendo.
the verdict of that? Nintendo won.
Yeah, it was. I think Universal City Studios lost bad faith.
Oh, holy smokes!
Because they technically didn't own King Kong.
Wow.
And all they knew was a way to confuse King Kong and Donkey Kong. So.
Wow.
So it was a fun little story.
That is unbelievable.
As well, we just talked about it a couple weeks ago. 1989 saw 1988 in Japan, 89 here in the U.S. Mm-hmm. Oh, I'm sorry. No, 89 both in Japan and the U.S. I apologize. Saw the Game Boy, which is one of the biggest handheld systems, selling systems, successful systems of all time.
One word. Tetris.
Yes, that was the pack-in game. That was a huge, huge gamble. You would think Nintendo's going to pack in a Mario game.
Right, exactly.
But no,
huge gamble.
They packed in Tetris, which helped both Game Boy and helped Tetris.
Right, exactly.
Personally,
Tetris was one of those games where it really made you think. You know, you had to be very fast, reactive.
Well, it's scientifically proven. It's called the Tetris effect. People who play Tetris, they just kind of see Tetris in their lives. Wherever they look, they're putting stuff together. They see Tetris. Tetris has been proven to combat PTSD. So, you know, it's got some good stuff.
Allow me to also say one other thing. There was I'm going to bring a little bit of the element of the Yin and the Yang podcast over to the retro gamers here. And that is that there was a study done by the American Journal of Medicine that when they looked upon gamers, and they were testing reflexes as well as hand and eye coordination and things like that, video gamers or avid, consistent video gamers actually have a 24% more of an accurate focus. They called it an attention span, as opposed to basically people who are non-video gamers, which I found very interesting. This was a study done that was done a couple of years ago, especially because they were looking at hand and eye coordination, how the body reacts to it, your blood pressure, what your stress level is and things like that. That was actually discovered by accident. It was actually a bonus from what they were studying up on. And so I guess it is good to be a video gamer,
Absolutely, brother. Yep. So, so the Game Boy, just home run. So let's go 89 to 95. Well, really the next iteration, the fourth generation at this point. So Nintendo's trucking along, dominating the 8-bit, and then they go, you know what? Let's double this bad boy. And this is when we see the Super NES come out here in North America. Of course, the Super Famicom came out in November of 1990. Super NES in August of 91.
Let me ask you a question, and this is coming from a historian's point of view, right? Take out the historian within you, and let me ask you this. Do you feel that with Nintendo having a good run the way it did, was the Super NES, not talking about Japan, not talking about the Super Famicom, I'm talking about the Super NES, was it necessary in this country? Because they had a pretty good run at that point. They were still trucking along.
Well, yeah. Definitely. It was just the next phase, the next iteration.
No, meaning, do you think that they introduced it and promoted it at the right time?
I think so, yeah. Because around that time, Genesis came out in 89. So Nintendo was already behind the ball as far as timing with a 16.
Oh, okay.
You had TurboGrafx. Right. TurboGrafx 16 was already out.
TurboGrafx 16, yes, exactly.
Which wasn't that much of a fighter. But
I will say this, though. But the Nintendo Entertainment System, the original NES, was kind of like, honest to God, it was like the Beatles no, it really, when you really think about it, I know it's a very horrible comparative, but when you really think about it, America was reeling over the loss of a lot of great American musicians at the time, and the Beatles filled that empty gap that a lot of people were yearning for. Now, in the video game world, parallel, you have, as you said, a downtime. or a very tough time in the moment of video games in the 80s, and here comes the Nintendo Entertainment System, and it changes everything. It's like the Beatles of
I can see
video
that.
gaming.
I can see what you're talking about.
Right. And then now you have the Super Nintendo, right? And the Super Nintendo really, really ups the ante. I mean, oh, man. The classic games that came out of that was just unbelievable.
Oh, forget about it. Super Mario World, Link to the Past, F-Zero, Super Mario Kart.
F-Zero and Super Mario Kart were my two favorite games.
Quick stats here on the Super NES. Ken, November 21st, 1990 in Japan, August 23rd, 91 in North America. Sold for $200 initially. Ran from 1990 to 2003, basically. North America sold 23.35 million units. Japan, 17.17 million. Best-selling games, Super Mario World, Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario Kart, and... Now, hold on. Those three games I just mentioned were the pack-ins. Remember, systems used to come with a pack-in game. So as soon as you hooked up the system, you had a game to play.
Right,
so that,
exactly.
To be fair, that boosted the sales for a lot of games. So Super Mario World, Donkey Kong Country, Super Mario Kart. The game that on its own was ranked number 4 at 6.3 million was Street Fighter 2.
Oh, ho, 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 ho. Wow. That is a crazy stat, brother. Oof.
So we're deep into this now. The Super NES is up and running. It's going great. And the creator of the Game Boy goes, you know what? We're going to need something new. And then the Virtual Boy came out. So moving on to the Nintendo 64.
Anthony's favorite console, the Virtual Boy.
Yeah, all right. You know what? Let's talk about it. We've put it to rest. We've laid it to rest.
I'm sorry about that.
No, it's okay. No, I'm bringing it up. I have, deep emotions that I go through a lot. Witnessing my podcast partner Anthony Rippo destroy a Virtual Boy on camera.
Oh, jeez.
But again, you gotta sometimes break a few eggs. And they tried. You can't fault Nintendo for trying the Virtual Boy. Were you there?
True.
Did you try the Virtual Boy? Because I brought it over to Anthony's when I got it.
I tried it once.
You did try it?
I didn't like it.
Okay,
personally.
yeah.
I just was not comfortable with it.
Neither did Anthony.
Sorry.
I was the only one who liked it. And I lugged that whole thing over, box and all.
I'm not saying that I didn't like it. I'm just saying that I just wasn't very good at it. That's the only difference.
So 1995, the Virtual Boy came out, and basically 1995, I think the Virtual Boy was gone. So Super Famicom over in Japan got Satellaview, which again was online. Japan had online capabilities way before we did. That I'm very jealous about.
Of course.
And then let's dip into 1996. And actually right around now is when this came out. But then after the Super Nintendo, we dip into the 64-bit graphics. It was all about graphics with the release of the Nintendo 64.
Folks, we went from 8 to 16, not to 32, okay, but to 64. Think about that, all right? Apparently, they didn't want to waste the time with the 32-bit.
No, not at all. We'll call it like an Ultra Nintendo Entertainment System, though the code name was Ultra 64. But the Nintendo 64 comes out, no pack-in game, because I bought the Nintendo 64, and I had it for about 2 weeks before getting my first game.
Still have mine, brother.
Nintendo 64 was a literal game changer. Super Mario 64, Legend of Zelda, Ocarina of Time, some great sports games on there, and
Mario Kart. How
ad nauseum and for hours on end did we play No Mercy, WrestleMania 2000,
WCW versus the World.
Exactly. NWO World Tour.
That's the only game I still have.
Oh, really?
For the N64.
I think I have World Tour.
Wow.
I might have World Tour. So
we spent a lot of hours playing Mario Kart too.
We did. So let me ask you: at this point, Ant, are you buying the systems as they're coming out? Are you keeping up with the times, or like in your household, are you? You know what? I got this system. I got the NES or the Super NES. I don't need an N64.
Well, right now, I have. Oh, you talking about retro?
No,
video
I meant back
games?
then, like in '96, like when the N64 came out. Were you out there trying to get an N64?
Oh yeah, well, because at that point I had a job.
That's true.
I had a part-time job. So now at that point, my father basically just looked at me and said, "Oh, you want $20? Go out and get it yourself.
You're on your own."
So I said, "Okay, fine." So that's when I worked in that glorious chocolate factory.
Oh, that's when you started working there,
right? I worked in a movie theater first, and then I worked in the chocolate factory.
Didn't you work at the old Sheepshead Bay?
Yes, that's right. The old UA at Sheepshead Bay.
Yep.
Right. And I saved up enough money. It took me about a month to save up for the N64 and 3 games, which was pretty awesome.
What games do you remember?
So it was WCW versus the World.
Okay.
Mario Kart, which is why I love those 2 games so much. Mm. And was it World Tour?
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Those are the 3 games that I bought.
What do you think of the controller? Because when the N64 controller came out, that was a real, going from Nintendo to Super Nintendo, there were 4 more buttons, 2 of which were shoulder buttons. You're like, all right, we can get used to this. When the N64 came out, it looked like you can beat somebody up with it and do serious damage. Which was the best part.
Which was the best part. Because as a martial art guy, I think that would be a great weapon. Plus, you had the wire to basically choke somebody.
Exactly.
Right? Well, I mean, in all honesty, for me, okay, of all the NES controllers, of all the Nintendo controllers, I will say to you that the 64 was the most comfortable. The most uncomfortable was the original Nintendo.
Really?
Entertainment system.
Okay.
I felt it was boxy. It was very uncomfortable.
It was.
I felt that the N64 contoured your hand, so it felt a lot better. With the additional buttons, they did have their reason. They did have their purpose to it, which is really cool. The Super Nintendo, I don't like so much. I didn't like the controls to it. It was still a little better, right? But not that great,
Fair enough.
So there you go.
So let's run down this 5th generation system. The N64, June 23rd, 1996, comes out in Japan. We get actually 2 copies. September 26th, 1996 was a limited edition N64, and then September 29th, 1996 was the official release.
So, for the fans out there, what's the difference between the 2?
That is a very good question. I honestly have no idea.
Okay.
Let's see what we got. But while that's loading, just some other stats here. Lifespan of the system, 96 to 02. In America, the N64 sold 20.63 million units. Japan only 5.54 million. So
why do you think that is? Is that because they already have a lot of competition involved?
I think they were just they was just still plugging away with the Famicom. Remember, the Famicom didn't stop there till 03.
Right.
So
I see.
Still have no idea what the special edition N64 was.
While you're looking at that info, let me point something out, okay? If you look at Nintendo, I think one other thing that makes them very successful is the idea that they can make games that appeal to everybody of all ages, of all categories, of all subjects and things like that. Whereas if you look at video gaming today, you'll notice that a lot of the video games that are made by Sony, made by Xbox, are very adult-oriented games, where there's not really a general scope that is a plethora for everybody. I just feel like at that time, it appealed to all ages. So you didn't have to, and it does not today. Well, because, I mean, obviously, parents, I feel like nowadays are a lot more lax about allowing their kids to play violent video games or to play adult-contented video games. Especially when you have the online concept now, which they didn't have back then. So, you wanted to play with your friend simultaneously, you had to go over to their house. Very different world.
No, this is true. But Nintendo still is a family. As much as the Switch is getting a lot of M-rated games now.
But still, very family-oriented.
That Link's Awakening is adorable. So
yeah, absolutely.
And then after the N64, then we get into more of the modern stuff that everyone's aware of. The GameCube, the Wii, the Wii U, the Nintendo Switch. GameCube almost put Nintendo out of business of the hardware.
Why is that?
The game, now to me, don't get me wrong, I love the GameCube. I think the GameCube is one of the most underrated systems that there was, but it just didn't sell. Only sold 12.94 million units, which was not a lot. You had those little mini discs as opposed to a full size CD that games would have come on. And the button, there was about 97 different buttons on the controller. So the GameCube, we talked about this recently. The GameCube basically suffered from lack of third party games. Even though it lasted about 6 years, it had trouble. It had trouble getting out of the box. No pun intended, because it's shaped like a cube. But I remember reading articles saying how Nintendo may stop making home consoles.
Wow.
I remember that big time. But luckily,
by the time the Cube came along, I stopped buying Nintendo consoles at that point.
Here, put this in perspective. I think the GameCube sold half of what Nintendo forecasted. So
wow. Holy smokes. But,
what I want to do is, and everyone knows, I mean, these are some great systems. We can go through the whole series. But let's talk about some of the iconic characters from Nintendo. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but let's not even characters as much as series. The Punch-Out series. I'm not even talking, this is even after Mike Tyson. Little Mac, Glass Joe, King Hippo. The Metroid series, Samus, the Metroids themselves, Riley. Legend of Zelda goes without saying. The Mario series goes without saying. F-Zero, Captain Falcon, if you remember him. Kirby coming into his own. Of course, Donkey Kong. And, which is a global phenomenon unto itself, Pokemon. Remember, Nintendo made Pokemon.
You're absolutely correct. 100%. And that's just really unbelievable to me because, to be very honest with you, nobody really knows that, or they look upon Pokemon as something that's separate, but Pokemon is just, wow. They really came up with a crazy good concept at that point. Yeah,
definitely.
I would say my favorite character in the Nintendo world is, there's two characters. It's a tie between Luigi and my man Yoshi.
Okay.
Just there's something about Yoshi. He's cute. I don't know. Yoshi, those two characters.
Yoshi was planned for the original Super Mario Brothers.
Really?
They just couldn't do it. Graphically, they couldn't do it. And
listen, I don't care what anybody says out there. In my humble opinion, Mario can jump higher than Luigi can jump higher than Mario.
Depending on the games.
Well, if you look at the original Super Nintendo, Mario jumped lower.
We'll have to put that to the test. We may have to put that to the test.
And the perfect test is when they jump for the flag.
That's
Look at
true.
how high Luigi gets.
That's true. So, and then Nintendo had their fair share of interesting anecdotes. Like, for example, I remember hearing a story with the N64. If you wanted to publish on the Nintendo 64, you had to pre-purchase like 250,000 cartridges that you would put your game on. And only one company sold those cartridges, and that was Nintendo. So Nintendo was making money whether or not your system sold.
Wow.
They had, they had situations, the whole Tengen series. If you remember, Tengen, we talked about this last episode, had those weird shaped cartridges for the NES. I
don't remember those.
You don't remember this? No. This fought the lockout. This actually bypassed a lockout feature on the NES that would prevent basically anyone from making a game on the Nintendo. So Tengen got around that with these games.
And by the way, what do you remember the most about maintaining your Nintendo? Your first Nintendo?
You talk about having to blow into the cartridges?
Well, there's that. There's also one other thing you can do.
Which is?
Take a Q-tip, put rubbing alcohol on the Q-tip, and graze it across the innards.
Of course, that's what you should be doing. You should never blow into the cartridge.
Oh, ask Anthony that question when he comes back. But how many times I've seen him. And then also, if you put the game in a certain way and then you press power, it'll work too.
Yep. It's weird, and I'm still trying to figure out the science behind it, but back in the 80s, there was no internet for us. But how in the heck did we all know? I didn't know you in the 80s. How did we all know to blow into a cartridge? It was never in a book. I never read it.
You know what it is? I think that, probably, we're told to dust everything. Mm-hmm. Maybe if we saw it collect dust or something like that, maybe we thought that there was something that's in there. Then again, you also have what we call text messaging back then, which was sitting in class and then passing a paper over to somebody else, like a chain gang. And then when it got to you, you would ask a question like I would always say to my friend Dave, I would write him something and then pass it to my classmate, and then my classmate passed it to my classmate, all the way down to Dave. Dave would write back and then pass it back down to me. And and basically, one of the questions I remember was, how do my cartridge is not working? Is it the system or is it the cartridge? And this is what he told me to do. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I got to know it, and then that's when I told Anthony about it. Interesting, right?
Very. It's the time. Time flies, to be honest with you.
That was our internet back then, word of mouth.
And also, talking about how I mentioned earlier, where Donkey Kong was originally supposed to be Popeye, this is something else that basically changed the way the gaming history was. Square Company, now Square Enix, they were getting ready to put out a Final Fantasy game on the N64. But due to the extremely heavy censorship of Nintendo, Square went, forget it, we're not putting your game on N64, we're going to Sony and this new system called the Sony PlayStation. Because the Sony PlayStation is synonymous with Final Fantasy.
Wow. Final Fantasy, it's one of those games that I gotta say I've never really played. Now, I don't know a whole lot about. I know of it, but I've never really played it.
It's
weird,
a good
isn't
one.
it?
Well, they got the few remakes coming out. So Nintendo has.
You know what the joke about that was, right? In school, if it's called Final Fantasy, why do they keep making more and more parts?
Well, there are really no. I think there's only 2 direct sequels. Otherwise, they're all basically like their own story, almost like an anthology.
Oh, okay. I see. That's funny.
So, with all their pluses and some of their, stalls, Nintendo, you survive 130 years for one reason. Because you know what you're doing and you're not afraid to take chances.
Exactly.
I want to mention a couple of quick things here. A couple of people commented on our Facebook page, Retro Gamers at Retro Gamers Podcast. I just want to mention here, Aaron, I apologize, Aaron Elfstrom, because I put up, I'm like, what is some of your memories of the Nintendo? And he put, and I quote, I think I got the NES a year after it came out for my birthday or Christmas. I had started with a 2600 and then jumped from Atari to the Nintendo, was just mind-blowing at the time. Playing Mario, Duck Hunt for the first time was, shall I say, a life-changing experience. I was bit by the video game bug then and haven't looked back since. I play mostly PC now, but always, always, always come back to the NES still to this day.
Absolutely.
And this other guy, Glenn Nataro, I think that's how you pronounce it. I remember getting my first Nintendo back in, I believe, 86 and playing Mario and Kung Fu as the first games I got. Game. Kung Fu was hard.
You think so?
You ever beat Kung Fu?
Yes.
I've never beat.
Many a times.
I don't think I've ever gotten to Mr. X.
No, come on. Mr. X he's tough, though. I'm not going to lie to you.
You were about to say easy.
Kind of for me when you figure out the pattern or you figure out the way.
Glenn continues, after playing Atari and Intellivision and seeing this vast environment and colors, I was blown away. And then our buddy Charles Herbert put a GIF of, basically Nintendo, Mario over his first 4 years. So, what is your fondest memory of Nintendo?
Fondest memory? Wow.
Any system, anything, any game, any movie, television show, anything.
I think that one of the fondest memories in the world for me was just missing the time of playing video games with my brother. and with my little brother, and we would just spend hours, man, just playing Tetris. We were playing, Tecmo World Wrestling. We were playing Double Dribble. I mean, there was just so many great games throughout the years. Mike Tyson's Punch Out, and then upgrading it to James Buster Douglas Boxing on the Super Nintendo.
Oh man,
and then
that's a good one.
That was a good one, yeah. And then then they made Evander Holyfield Boxing, in which, by the way, I have Evander Holyfield signed my my game.
That's cool.
Evander, actually, I met him at the grind at work, and he signed it for me.
That's cool.
And that was really cool. And the other thing was just the years that I spent with my brother playing video games was just amazingly cool for me, because it was a time where I really wish I can get back with my brother. And I mean, till this day, we still play video games together. When I go to his house, and we introduce it to my nephews now. But I mean, my nephews are playing. My one nephew is 4, going to be 4, and he's already playing with the Switch.
That's cool.
Yeah, which and he loves his Wii boxing. And my brother loves the Wii boxing because it tires him out.
Oh, I'm sure.
So then he just sleeps like a baby, like he is. So it's great, and it's so cool. I mean, so it's great to see one generation playing it with the next generation. My uncle is a video gamer. My uncle actually
really
he has the Famicom. He still has his Famicom. He still has his Super Famicom, because in the 80s, my uncle would always travel to Japan for business. So he has the original Voltron, the car and the Lion. He has the original Optimus Prime. Like, he has in a box, by the way, not taken out, So he has like a lot of Robotech. But his prized possession is he has a lot of Japanese video gaming consoles, and he loves it. I mean, till this day. I mean, my uncle is probably right next to your Uncle Matt. He's probably one of the coolest, because he'll sit down and play video games with you, which is really awesome.
That's awesome. I remember even my dad got into gaming.
Really? No way.
His go-to is Dr. Mario on the NES.
Yeah.
And surprise, surprise, Desert Strike, War in the Gulf for Super Nintendo. Which he was very good at. So, and then just get, for Christmas, I remember getting Super Mario Brothers 2 for Christmas, and I was just over the moon for Super Mario Brothers 2.
Wow.
Actually, I remember I opened up the Christmas gift, and it was a lunchbox. I was like, oh, okay, thank you. And I just happened to open up the lunchbox, and Super Mario Brothers 2 was inside. And then I'll never forget the unveiling in the wonderful hit movie The Wizard of Super Mario Brothers 3.
Yes, that's right.
Still trying to figure out how little Jimmy Woods knew where the warp whistle. No, he didn't know. The girl knew where the warp whistle was on a game that no one ever saw before.
Wow. So crazy. Let me ask you this.
You got some issues there. Yeah.
Nintendo games adapted into movies. Okay? Do you think that the movie world did it any justice?
I mean, they're not winning any awards.
Or the TV show.
Super Mario Brothers, the movie with Bob Hoskins and
right.
What's his name? Who played Luigi?
I don't recall. Was it John Leguizamo?
Yes, John Leguizamo.
Okay.
Bob Hoskins said that was the worst movie he ever made.
Wow. Good.
He took that to his grave.
Wasn't Captain Lou Albano in the TV show Mario?
In the TV version, yes. That was cool. But yeah, Nintendo, I mean, they only really had the one game. Nintendo's very, very protective of their intellectual property. They don't really let them out much. I mean, we're getting a new Super Mario Brothers movie, an animated movie through DreamWorks, I believe. No, not DreamWorks. Illuminations. They may be part of DreamWorks. So
I'll give you. Oh, I'm sorry, Larry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, we're gonna get a new Super Mario Brothers movie. There's always been that rumor of a live Legend of Zelda on Netflix. The Castlevania anime on Netflix is amazing.
I've heard. I really heard. I gotta check it out. Sure.
But hopefully we'll see something good. Yeah.
I'll give you one other memory. I remember playing Godzilla, King of the Monsters.
Yes. Well, you play as either Godzilla or Mothra?
Right. And my brother played with Godzilla, and he literally beat the entire game.
There you go.
Before I did, and I was so upset. And to make matters worse, now you gotta remember, this is before internet, this is before photoshopping, before anything like that. Literally, Larry, he took a picture with my father's camera of the credits and showed it to me when I got home. I was so angry. It's not unbelievable.
That's pretty funny,
like,
actually.
Check this out. And basically, he told my mom to go to develop the pictures.
Yeah.
So I was like, man, this is before you could take a picture with your phone, kids.
Yeah, so Nintendo, very careful of their properties, because let's not forget the terrible CDI games, the Mario, the Zelda CDI games. They were just not cool at all.
Absolutely.
But Nintendo survives. The Switch is doing phenomenal. And again, 130 years, they're doing something right.
Unreal. I mean, I wonder if there's a celebration in Japan for this.
Oh, I'm sure there probably was. Maybe a small 130 right? Is not, when you get to 150, then look out. But
definitely.
But we'll see. I think you can even find the original plaque of where the original building was is still up somewhere, I think.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So,
do you remember some years ago there was a video game movie about, like, I forgot what it was called, but where the creator of Pac-Man was trying to calm him down, and then all of a sudden he tried to attack his maker.
Oh, Pixels.
Pixels, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you like that movie?
I did. I thought it was very fun.
Did you? I mean, that wasn't a Nintendo-based film, right?
No, they got some licensing. They were able to get it because Donkey Kong's in it.
Right, exactly.
And they were able
I was about to ask you.
It was an Adam Sandler movie, and they were able to get the rights to a lot of those games. But it was fun. Here's what I hate. People like with Pixels. Oh, movie was terrible. The acting was terrible. The acting was horrible. This, that, and the other thing. It's not going to win Oscars. It was never meant to win an Oscar. It's just fun to watch.
Right,
That's all it
exactly. Is. Exactly. So, and there's nothing wrong with that.
None whatsoever. So, but I think we're going to get ready to wrap this one up for, the Retro Gamers has always been accused of being Nintendo heavy, and this was a Nintendo episode of the celebration that is Nintendo. We still want to hear from you. What is some of your wonderful, wonderful moments, wonderful memories of the Nintendo Entertainment System, any iteration? Again, movies, television, music, anything like that. And Ant, thank you very much for joining us this week.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, man. I really appreciate it. And I really want to say thank you so much to all the Retro Gamer listeners out there, the watchers out there. You guys are some awesome fans. As I listen to this show every week myself, I'm telling you, it is just every time that I think that you guys are doing an amazing show, you always prove that the next episode's even better.
Yeah, it's thank you. I appreciate those kind words. And one more time, let them know where they can find the Yin and the Yang podcast.
Yin and the Yang podcast every Friday, ladies and gentlemen. You can find it on Spreaker, which is our home base. You can find it practically everywhere you can find podcasts. Just type in the Yin and the Yang podcast. And please follow us, like us, spread the word about it on Facebook. Just go to the search, just type in the Yin and the Yang podcast. We are there. And hey, we are more than glad to take any questions. If you guys want to talk about any questions about any video games that involve martial arts or sports or anything like that, you can always email us at yinandyangpodcast@gmail.com. Once again, that's yinandyangpodcast@gmail.com.
Awesome. And hopefully we'll have, as much as we love Anthony Chu on the show this week, but with everything happening, again, Anthony Rippo recovering wonderfully. Hope to have him back here next week.
Get well, brother.
Absolutely, brother. And everybody, we will catch you right here next week on the Retro Gamers Podcast.